Welcome to this series of videos related to research methods in health profession education. My name is Muhammad Hassan Taha. I am medical educationalist, the director of the Medical Education Center at University of Sharjah, and the director of the Master of Leadership in Health Profession Education and the PhD in Health Profession Education. In this series of videos, we will be discussing together research methods in health profession education. And we cannot start talking about research methods in health profession education before talking about writing effective research proposal. In today's session, we'll be discussing research proposal in health profession education. And this session hopefully will be helpful for postgraduate health profession education students at the level of the master and the PhD. And we'll be using example of a template of research proposal. However, the students need to consider the difference of the templates between the different universities across the world. So the session will cover definition of the research proposal, the title of the research proposal, issues related to the introduction, background, conceptual framework, problem statement, justification of research. Then we'll go to research questions, objective, overview of writing the method section for the proposal, then the ethics component, important issues to be considered in ethics, the budget timeline, and putting all these things together. Let us start by defining the research proposal. Whenever we think about research proposal, we have to think about these three things. Research proposal, we should look at it as the blueprint. A blueprint from planning till dissemination of the result. It should consider all sections. Also think about it as a gatekeeper with the ethical approval, and think about it as a communication in which you communicate a message with your supervisor and the other stakeholder maybe. So what is the research proposal? It is a structured document that outlines what you intend to study, why it is matter, what is the rationale behind, what is the important, what are you going to do, and how you plan to conduct your investigation, reassuring the ethics committee and the other part that you are doing the right things and you are doing things rightly before beginning your study. So when we say a blueprint, that we are referring to it is a guide from question to data collection to dissemination. The gatekeeper with the ethical approval, whether board or committee, at university or at your organizations. And you should demonstrate a scientific rigor throughout the process, including the value of your research, why you are doing this research and why it is important, and the ethical issues, ensuring the supervisors and your peers. As I said, research proposal template may differ from one university to other. However, there is agreement on these sections. We'll go through the title, introduction, background, problem statement, justification, question, objective, methodology, ethics, and the other appendices. So the title of the research proposal must be concise, and it should be not more than 25 words. It should be informative to the reader, and there is no jargon or abbreviation to be used in your research proposal title. In order to achieve this, being specific, concise, informative, no jargon, it is better to think about a framework for writing your research proposal title. And it is very helpful to think about this framework, which we will revisit it again when we talk about research question. It is also a framework for research question. The first framework is PICO, and PICO, P for population, I for intervention, C for comparison, and O for outcome. The second framework is BCC framework, and B for population, C for concept, and the other C for context. The third framework is SPIDER framework, S for sample, B for phenomenon, I for interpreted design, E for evaluation, or R for the research type. Which one should I use? It depends on the study design. If I'm using experimental and quantitative study design where there is intervention and comparison, I should go with this framework PICO. If I'm using descriptive study or scoping review, systematic review, I will go with this population, concept, and context framework. Systematic for qualitative analysis for the systematic. So basically, for the descriptive, I should go with the BCC. For the spider one, if I'm doing mixed research methods or qualitative research, in some aspects, I can use this. Let us take example for PICO. The first example of a title, Impact of Simulation-Based Training versus Standardized or Standard Didactic Revision on OSCE Scores in a Final Year Medical Students, a Randomized Control Trial. Here, if we see here, the population is the medical student, final year medical student. And the intervention here, assessing the impact, and the comparison versus the standard revisions, and the outcome is for the score. This example of using PICO. BCC for scoping review, here, clinical feedback practice among supervisor in XYZ teaching hospital scoping review. So B here, the supervisors and the concepts, the clinical feedback practice, and the context is scoping review. Within doing scoping review, within the teaching hospital. And another example is assessment practices in African medical school scoping review of competency-based education. So competency-based medical education, the context, African medical school, the population, and assessment practice, the concept. For SPIDER, we are using SPIDER for qualitative and mixed methods. And example here, lived experience of medical students transitions to clinical training, a phenomenological study at XYZ hospital. And here we are using the sample for medical students and the population here, or the phenomena here, transition to clinical practice, and the E for lived experience, and the R research type is the phenomenological study design. So SPIDER for sample, phenomena, interpreted design, evaluation, and research type. Let us go to the background of the research. So what is the background of the research proposal? The background should state your study within the existing knowledge. So should it situate your study within the existing knowledge, and you should provide scholarly and contextual foundation of your study. And here, it is a place to show why this study is important, and the place to orient your readers, the examiners, an overview of your study, the scope. And you should show that you master the existing knowledge about the existing literature, and you should establish credibility within the research ethics and the supervisors, showing that this research is very important by building evidence-based case and need for this research, and how the background build the context. You typically start with the global, then regional, and then you narrow to the local context, highlighting the gap. And this is called funnel shape structure. And you may take a screenshot of the screen about this example of writing or the first paragraph of the background. The other function of the background is to identify the knowledge gap. And the background must show what is known, what is not yet known, and show the gap clear. And the background should lead to problem statement. And so the final paragraph of the background should lead to a clear statement of the problem, and the reader should feel that the problem statement is not natural and inevitable conclusion of everything presented in the background. How to write strong background for your research? You should again start with the global, regional, then local funnel shape. You should synthesize the evidence, not just copy paste the literature. You should explicit identify the gaps. You should have a logical narrative flow toward the problem statement. You should use local data or maybe institutional relevant if you are studying your institution. And you have cite the recent and updated reference in your background. Now let's go down to the problem statement of your research proposal. What is the problem statement? Problem statement is defined as a concise, precise statement that identify a specific issue to be investigated. And the problem statement should explain why it exists and indicate why this matters. The function of the problem statement is to transform the background narrative into focused research need. You should justify clear the need for your research. Why the problem statement is a very important part of research proposal? Because it should tell the reader why the study is needed now. You should show the urgency of the study. It helps the reader and the assessor to focus the scope of the entire proposal. Here, the entire proposal and the entire problem focus here. This paragraph shows the need for this research. It should directly generate the research question because the research question and objective should generate from this problem statement. The function of a very good problem statement should convince the reviewer and the assessor that this research is urgent and should be done in order to solve a problem or to fill a gap or to come with something that should be helpful in the implication of or in practice. Let us see and analyze the characteristic of a strong problem statement. It should be specific, identify the exact problem, not general. It should be evidence-based, supported by data and literature. It should be researchable and can be addressed through a systemic investigation. It should be feasible, practical to really address it, and it should be significant in addressing the gap with the real world. How to develop it? Let us see this stepwise approach to write a problem statement. We have to identify the broad topic and its significant, review the literature, pinpoint the specific gap, inconsistency, or unresolved issue, state the consequence of leaving this problem unsolved. This should be written clearly, and then write clear 2 to 4 sentences that articulate the problem. This is example of good and bad problem statement. We should not write it in a general way, like this study examine OSCE importance, or being very broad, or some students, they include the solution within the problem statement, or some students may fail to cite evidence that support this problem statement. Here is the example of good problem statement. You may take a screenshot from this screen and see how the problem statement could be written. Now, we should also write the justification for the study, and we should distinguish between the justification and the problem statement. What is the justification? Justification explains why the study is worth conducting. It goes beyond identifying the gaps, which is shown in the problem statement, to argue that investigating this gap will generate a valuable knowledge and produce a meaningful benefit. And the justification should answer the so what of this study. It should be scientific, address the evidence gaps, maybe such as adding new knowledge or replicate or extend important prior work in new context, or we can focus on clinical education, where this research might enhance the patient safety or clinical competency or service delivery, or maybe policy in terms of informing curriculum design, standard of assessment, or national policy, or maybe social, how the benefit, how the patient could benefit from this research, community or vulnerable group. A very important thing to be considered, how to write a good justification. You should address each relevant type above by explicit. Don't assume reviewer will infer the important just from the two angle, scientific, clinical, policy, or social. Avoid vague statement like this study is important. Always explain how and for whom it is important. And this example of sentence considered as a justification for the study. So in a summary, comparing the purpose of the background at the beginning to provide scholarly context and map existing literature. Problem statement, identify the specific issues, recurring investigation, and the justification argue why addressing the problem is valuable and necessary. The focus of background is broad, problem statement is narrow, and of the specific unresolved issue, and for the justification, the benefit of the study. The main question answered by background, what do we already know? Problem statement, what specific issue must be solved? And justification, why it was investigation. The position of the proposal in the background, usually in the introductory section, problem statement at the end of the introduction, and the justification follow problem statement. Example here, review of OSCE outcomes and simulation evidence globally, regionally, at a specific university, could be come early. For the problem statement, maybe no structured simulation OSCE preparation exists at a specific university, so this leads to failure with the problem statement. And the justification should be written clearly that evidence will improve competency, patient safety, and guide national simulation policy. So this is an example how to compare between them. And this remind that these sections are distinct, but they are sequential. Background should build the context. Problem statement, identify the specific gap. Justification, argue why this gap must be closed. So each one lead the other. So it's very important here to understand the conceptual framework. And the conceptual framework show all the relationship between these variables and how these identify and your study why this study is important and why it should be conducted and how this study will contribute to the body of the literature. So it should describe knowledge in the literature, identifying the gap, outline the methodology, underpinning the answer why this research is important, and what new will be generated from this study. Now we'll go to the literature review, which should be written in a very brief in the proposal. Some university, literature review is not part of the proposal, but in some university, they ask you to write a literature review. When writing a literature review, you should think about these 5 C's. You should think about the context, concept, contrast, critical appraisal, and conclusion. For the context, you have to establish the educational significance of the problem. For the concept, you have to introduce the key theoretical construct underpin these problems. And here you may start introducing the conceptual framework. For the contrast, you have to highlight the gap, what do existing study not telling us. And for the critical appraisal, you have to evaluate the quality of the existing evidence. Are prior study rigorous, biased, or not generalizable? What are the limitations there? And for the conclusion, you have to end with the clear statement that directly lead the reader to the research question. And the next slide will be about the research question. When we think about the research question, please remind yourself with the framework that we discussed early in this video related to the title. So either you can use PICO framework for the intervention, comparison outcomes, either quantitative or experimental. BCC framework for the exploratory descriptive question or scoping review. Spider for the mixed method or qualitative, which for sample, phenomenal, the design, evaluation, and the research types. And the final framework, which we use it to assess the quality of the research question. Let us go through the PICO framework. Example, final year medical students at the University of, this for population, intervention like maybe assessing the simulation, comparison compared to the other methods, and the outcome related to student achievement. Example for formulated PICO, in final year medical students at specific university, does simulation-based education, OSCE preparation, compared to standard teaching methods, improve the performance? And we use PICO when we test educational intervention, when we use RCT or quasi-experimental, and when we are comparing. The other framework is for BCC, for exploratory research, and scoping review for population, concept, and context. Population, what is being studied. Concept, what phenomena, issue, or the topic is being examined. And the context, what, where, and under which circumstances does this occur. We are using Spider for qualitative and mixed research methods. S for sample, maybe 4 years medical students have completed their clinical rotations. Phenomena of interest, live experience, transition from preclinical to clinical. Design using qualitative, immunology or other qualitative design. Evaluation, their perception, their emotional, their coping strategies, their stress. And the research type may be qualitative research type. Typically, it's not for experimental research. And the question here could be, what are the lived experience of 4 years medical students transition to clinical training in a hospital? So this framework for a question. How to decide that this question, research question, is good or no? We should use a final framework for validating any research question. The first question that I should ask, is this research question is feasible or not? Can we realistically do this research or no? This is very important. Do we have enough participants, time, funding? Is it interesting to the health professional education community, to the policymakers, to the your organization? Is it novel? Does it add new to the knowledge? Does it challenge the existing assumptions, or just we replicate what is done? Is it ethical? Because educational research may hold some ethical issues. So we have to. Is it relevant? Will the finding change practice or influence policy, advance the theory? So always remember that this final framework, feasible, interesting, novel, ethical, and relevant. Now we'll go to the aim of an objective. Aim is general objective. It is broad goal of your study, maybe to evaluate the impact of simulation training on OSCE performance. And then the objective, we have the primary objective, which is a measurable endpoint from the aim, directly linked to the research question. We should use strong action verb to compare, to assess, to evaluate, to determine, to describe. We should avoid using to understand or to improve, because they are non-measurable. Always think about SMART, specific, name the exact outcome, measurable, should be quantified for quantitative research method, achievable, feasible within the time and the resource, relevant, that means related to the research question, and time-bounded within the time of the study. Always, for a master, use time-bound, consider the time-bound, because you have a short time to do your research. We have different study design, and these details related to study design is beyond the scope of this session, but we have the quantitative study design, qualitative study design, or mixed study design. For the method section of your research proposal, you have to write about the population and the sample size calculation if it is quantitative research. If you are doing intervention, you have to write about it clearly, and the exposure, also the expected outcomes, the data collection and the analysis, and also the quality assurance measure for the analysis in terms of enhancing the reliability of the finding and so on. This very important aspect of research proposal is the ethics. And ethics is not about only obtaining the ethical approval. Ethical approval is part of the process to ensure that you are doing research according to ethics. And the main aim of the ethics is to protect the participants. It's very important when thinking about the ethics, things about the informed consent, in which you should describe clearly the process. You should tell the participant that participation is voluntary, and you will maintain the privacy and confidentiality of your research. And they have the right to withdraw at any time without being affected by taking the decision of withdrawal from the research. You have to maintain privacy and confidentiality for the data. Privacy for the setting and confidentiality for the data. Before doing any research in education, you have to think about the risk and benefit. Does it worth to do this research? Because even in low-risk research in health profession education, it carries risk because maybe doing research itself can cause anxiety to the student. It's very important to think about the power dynamics in doing research. As the faculty members, there is a different power between us and the learners, and we don't be involved directly in doing the research with the learners, such as maybe collecting the data during a lecture or during a session. So we should recruit other researchers to do this data so that for ensuring the accuracy of the data and not to be affected by any power relationship. Participants should be informed clearly that they can withdraw any time from your research. It's very important, the ethics and the human protection ban. It's very important to consider the budget for your research and the timeline, starting from developing your protocol to obtaining the academic approval from your supervisor, then ethical approval, then development of the data collection tools, validation of the tools, if quantitative, or maybe then collecting the data, analyzing the data, writing the report, and maybe dissemination and so on. You have to consider the budget for the resources that you need, the human resources, the software that you need for the analysis, whether for statistic, maybe for quantitative, or the other software that could be helpful for qualitative. Think about maybe participation in a conference and so on, and always keep for the budget 10 to 15% of the total budget for unseen cost. Very important to think to report about the potential limitation when writing your proposal. This could be maybe limitation for recruitment or generalizability for a single study, single center study, any bias, any possible attrition, or any confounding factors, and we will talk about this variable clear, but the limitation should be considered in your proposal. Also, what is expected result from doing this research, anticipated directions of the finding based on the hypothesis, the potential educational significance, and how the result will be disseminated. The next slide will be about the common mistake and to avoid it. Avoid writing a vague and unstructured question. Avoid writing the literature, just copy-paste. Avoid making issues related to ethics section, missing some part, the analysis not clearly to be done. And in order to write a clear question, you have to use a proper framework, either PICO, BCC, SPIDER, and you have, after using the framework, to validate your research question with the Viner. For the literature review, always remind yourself with the 5 C's for the literature review. Always write, when you write the ethics section, consider the research ethics value. You have to mention the specific software that you will use and the specific test when you use a quantitative method. One of the common problems that the objective is not aligned with the methods. You have to map always the objective with the methods and map objective with the question. You have to, sometimes for the quantitative research method proposal, there is no sample size or no power calculations. You have to perform power analysis, and you have to state the power and the effect. In some proposal, we see that some students ignoring mentioning the potential limitations. It's very important to name the limitations proactively with the mitigation study. Sometimes some students didn't write or being unrealistic or optimistic in the timelines. You have to show the Gantt chart with the different milestones. This is very important slide. This is the checklist for the you can take a screenshot for this slide as the checklist. The title should be specific, concise, informative, less than 25 words. You should use a framework, BICO, BCC, or Spider. Please go back and see the examples related to this framework. The second section should be background, problem statement, and justification. Bear in mind that background start with providing context, concept, contrast, being critical, and conclusion. This for the literature review also applied here. Problem statement should explicitly identify the gap with supporting evidence. Justification should address scientific or clinical or policy or social dimension. The research question we are using BICO or BCC or Spider. Please be remembered which one to use in which situations. After using this, we are using finer criteria for validation. Question should be answerable within resources. You have to develop whether the theoretical or the conceptual framework based on your study design. You have to bear in mind that theory identify and name in the proposal. Theoretical framework explain how theory shape the study, and the conceptual framework justify why this study is conducted, including the gap and the rationale. Aim objective should be stated. They should be smart and use strong action verb. We should avoid unmeasurable action verbs such as to study and to examine or to measure. You have to justify the design chosen and align the design with the question, and you have to mention the details of the methods carefully, from the population, the setting, the study design, the data collection, tools, the analysis, the ethical part. Ethical approval is not enough. You have to write carefully how you will maintain the research ethics in your proposal. The takeaway from this session, research proposal is a structured argument. It should answer what, why, and how must flow logically and consistently from the beginning till the end. What is known, what is unknown, why this is study important, and how are you going to address these issues. Use framework for your research question, whether BICO, BCC, Spider, and validate this framework for your research question. Use conceptual framework to justify why this study is needed. In some study, we use the theoretical framework to explain how the theory shaped the study. Sometimes we should articulate both the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework in mixed design. The background, problem statement, and justifications, they are three distinct but sequential parts. Use 5 C's for the literature review. Objective should be smart. And always the reviewer firstly check the question and the objective. You have to pay attention to the ethic in your research proposal. And ethics in health professional education require special attention because there is a relationship, power relationship issue between us as educators or even the students and their colleagues while doing the research. Always, it's advisable to plan for independent data collections and consider the voluntary participation. The final key message from this video: the quality of research proposal and the quality of the research actually begin with the quality of your research proposal, because a guiding principles in health profession education, good research come from a good proposal. It's not only to write a good proposal, it's to write a good proposal and to follow what you have written in a good proposal. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I advise you and invite you to watch the other series of these videos which complement the research methods in health profession education. And again, these videos start from the research proposal, the literature review, then the conduction of the research, the analysis of the research, and the scientific writing. Thank you so much.